Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football show. As always, I am Carter, that's Mitch, and we are here to talk all things Alabama football with you. Although, as I said in the scheduling tweet for this one, I can't guarantee that we won't end up talking about the other semifinal more, just because, I don't know, it feels like there's a little bit more to talk about.
Yeah. Should we start with Florida?
Yeah.
I feel like we're
Their
kind of
current
far
game
removed
or
from
their one before that?
probably more interesting to talk about the one before that. I guess we're like kind of far removed now, and it's like kind of weird to go back. I feel like it's like not on anybody's mind anymore.
Yeah.
But maybe just like some quick impressions.
I mean, it really felt like it was just the sort of thing where, I don't know, if Florida played as well as they could, which they did for the most part, they were going to put up a fair number of points. And yet Alabama still would have won by like a fairly substantial, like there were just a couple of plays that where Alabama had the opportunities to make stops and didn't. And if they just make one or two of those, the final margin looks a lot different than it actually does. Like the 3rd and 17 that they gave up, where they were really just in like a drop 8 zone, and Dillon didn't get enough depth, and I think Pitts kind of snuck in behind him.
And 2 plays before that was when they didn't recover the fumble.
Yeah.
Despite having like 5 guys there ready to recover it. And somehow the one Florida guy got in there. And then obviously, and then your kind of your third play there is the goal line fumble.
Yeah.
Where Joe was offside. So
yeah. Or even like getting the fumble that they got and didn't punch that one in, because that put them in like what was it, like first and goal from the 10, which is always a really awkward situation to be in.
Yeah, Mitch, what about you? What was your like big takeaways?
I mean, I try not to overreact to like, maybe I go too far in not overreacting to like the Alabama defensive performance. But I just always come away from games like that as like, good offense is just like gonna be good defense these days, and like that's just a really good offense. And like I was looking at some like stats just because I wanted to see like what was even like what were comparable like defenses that defensive performances to what Alabama played against Georgia or against Florida. And like I was kind of like the two well, the best defense that Florida played probably outside of Alabama was Georgia. But that game was kind of over by like the 3rd quarter, that Georgia-Florida game.
Maybe by halftime, right?
Yeah. Or maybe by halftime, yeah. So what I was going to say is like, Alabama's points per drive that they gave up to Florida was like 4.5 points, which is like not great. That's like maybe one of the worst, outside of like the Ole Miss game, this season. But the Georgia defense gave up 4.8 like points per drive in that first half, and probably I didn't do the like 3rd quarter. It was probably about 4.5 through 3 quarters of that game, but that game was over. Like, and Florida was just burning clock. So it's like, I still think Alabama probably has the best defense in the country. It's just that the best defense in the country is just not what it's used to be because of how far offenses have come.
Well, like as frustrating as it was at times, did you ever feel like they were going to lose?
Not that they were going to lose, but like I was definitely more uncomfortable in that game than I was during the Ole Miss game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When they punched it in to make it 35-31, when Florida punched it in to make it 35-31, which I think might have been like very beginning of the 4th quarter. I don't really think Alabama's going to lose.
Me too.
But yeah, I was nervous. I was a little nervous. It's just like, look, I mean, they could have went out. Florida had gone 2 stops in a row at that point, right? I mean, one of them was Mac. Mac just totally botched that 4th down play when he threw it to the wrong crosser, and then the other one, the second drive, was derailed by a penalty. But like, they were coming off consecutive stops, and now it's a 4-point game. And if they had just gotten one more stop, Florida gets the ball with a chance to take the lead. It felt losable, I guess, at that point, even if I didn't think they were going to lose. But I will say, I'm pretty high on the Alabama defense. I am. I'm certainly relative to most people. I also think that best defense in the country is a bold claim. That's not to say that I would be able to say, like, I think X defense is better or Y defense is better. But I do think that, like, that requires, just based on, where the metrics have them and based on some of their performances in these games, I do think that, like, maybe requires more of an explanation.
Yeah, so I asked this question in the group chat, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Like, what defense would you trade for Alabama's defense? And I'm still not sure that I would trade Alabama's defense for anybody's defense.
Like, I don't know, there are individual units you might take. Like, you might take, I don't know, would you take Notre Dame's linebackers? Like off-ball linebackers, not like, I'm not giving up Will Anderson to anybody, but.
Yeah. I mean, if you give me, I'll take number 6 with the long name. I'll take him. I don't know about that middle linebacker, but, like, I'll take number 6. Yeah, it's weird because, like, the defense is like this is a very good Clemson defense, but it's not a great Clemson defense, right? So, like, that's one of the first defenses where it's one of the first places I would look to see, like, is there a defense better than Alabama's? And, like, okay, like, there's Clemson, and then there's Georgia, which I think Georgia's still number 1 by S&P Plus. I don't think they're number 1 by FPI. I don't even think they're the third according to. Okay.
They were far and away number 1 defensive FPI coming into the season. We had pretty strong priors on them, and they've kind of not performed to that level.
Okay. Like, the defenses that are ranked very highly, I'm just thinking of, like, an S&P Plus. It's hard to say that I would take some of those defenses over Alabama. It's very difficult for me to say that I would rather have Northwestern's defense over Alabama or Cincinnati's defense over Alabama. That's a tough sell.
Yeah, because, like, I don't know, you just get in situations like that where teams are, I don't know, deserving of those rankings in a sense because they are performance derived, and those teams have shut people down. But, like, there's only a handful of teams that have enough baseline talent on defense for me to say, like, oh, I would consider taking them over Alabama. Like,
right, because we're not even because this conversation is really less about, like, what you've done and more about, like, you've got your next game. What defense do you want on the field for your next game? Do you want Alabama's defense on the field for your next game, or do you want Northwestern's defense on the field for your next game?
Specifically against a good offense, right? Because if it's against a not great offense, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Alabama's going to be plenty good enough to dominate them.
Right.
Like, there are plenty of defenses, Cincinnati, Northwestern, whoever, who will probably do a better job shutting down a bad offense than this Alabama one would. But, like, are those teams going to compete against Clemson better than Alabama will?
Yeah. I mean, there are teams that I just disqualify making any trade for purely based on talent. And that's, like,
I think that's fair.
Like, Northwestern, I'm not trading for Northwesterns. I'm not trading for, like, Wisconsin's.
Yeah.
I'm not trading. I don't even know who else is up there in S&P Plus, but the next highest in FPI is, like, Iowa and Indiana. Like, no.
Right.
Nope. Indiana? Really?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Weird.
Which is, They're like 5 points better than what we had on preseason. But like, so really, it's just like two teams, like it's
Clemson
really
and Georgia.
Clemson and Georgia, and frankly, I don't think Georgia's defense has played better than Alabama has in any like they didn't play better than Alabama's defense did against Florida.
Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah, I think common opponents don't do much for an argument for Georgia. Like I'm thinking, like Mississippi State for one is like very lopsided.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying that like common opponents is the best way to do this, but I guess I don't really know how else to do it. And there's no question, like Alabama's defense is super talented.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys this, because I think this really sort of dovetails with any conversation about Florida, considering like, you know, if we're going to be on the negative side, the big story from the Florida game is the fact that the defense gave up a lot of yards and a lot of points. What are the things? What are like the 2 or 3 things that you would say that this defense is bad at, or if not bad, then like what are they weak at relative to other things?
The linebackers in coverage aren't outstanding.
Yeah. I don't think that the linebackers help a lot against the pass in general, because I was thinking, and I tweeted a little bit about this, but like Alabama, a lot, really in the past has made great use of blitzing their inside linebackers. Those like crossfire blitzes or those double A gap blitzes, and like if you think about like Reuben Foster and Rashaan Evans, like how incredible they were at those blitzes. These linebackers are just not that good at those. The timing never seems right. They never seem to get home. I'm not going to try to make any claim to knowing like what the technical issue here is, but they're just not as effective for whatever reason. So I just think like you have this combination of these pair of inside linebackers who, like Mitch said, are not great coverage players. So they're not helping against the pass in that way, and they're not great blitzers. So they're not helping against the pass in that way. So like you kind of have a hole there defensively. So okay. So just general coverage, general pass defense / blitz issues with the inside linebackers is kind of the big thing. Okay.
Like early in the season, you would have said safety play, but like,
Jordan Battle's been good.
Yeah. And Daniel Wright was really good against Florida.
Yeah.
Like
Daniel Wright's come on.
He has.
He's come on.
And similar, like earlier in the season, I think you maybe could have asked more from the defensive line, but I feel like Barmore stepped it up.
Barmore's playing like a star.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's not Alabama's most dominant defensive line of recent years, and they don't get much disruption outside of Chris Allen and Will Anderson and Barmore. But
that's true.
Like, they don't have like a depth of like disruptive playmakers and pass
guys aren't making splash plays.
Yeah. But like all 3 of those guys are playing. If you have 3 of those guys, that's a pretty good amount to have. Like, it's better than having just one. And everyone else is playing, like Tim Smith starting to play really well. And they're getting to the point where they have a pretty deep rotation that are all at least solid players. So
no LeBron Ray hurts. Continuing to not have him. I have no idea what his issue is.
So like 2 straight years he's had an injury that they didn't make it sound serious when it happened, and then he's just out the whole year.
And he's played a little bit, right?
Yeah. This year, not quite as definitive. Like he's gotten some snaps here and there in a few games, but not in a major role.
Yeah, it's to the point where like, what's his number now? 18, I think.
Yeah.
It's to the point where I remember a few games ago, I see number 18. I did like a double take. Like, who the fuck is that guy? He's like never on the field. So it's just, I don't know. Like I don't know what his status is, obviously for Friday or for a potential title game. But so like a lot of those problems, a lot of these things that people have flagged about this defense all year, right? Like coverage busts, miscommunications, the linebackers in coverage, Daniel Wright. That wasn't really the problem against Florida. Like none of that was.
Yeah,
They
like
just got destroyed by Pitts and Tony.
yeah. Like their main problem was the best unit on this defense, which is like the top three corners, just getting beat a lot, which doesn't happen to them very often, but I don't know. It does happen sometimes, and particularly when you're going against receivers that good that present those specific matchup problems as well. And Trask had a really good game. Like he threw a lot of really nice throws into tight coverage.
I thought Trask played great. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I was going to say, and also like they were like pretty like I felt like Mullen was pretty aggressive with his play calling too. Where like on the I think it was did Tony have more than one touchdown or he just have the one? Anyway,
He
I
might
think it was
have just had the one.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember.
right. So like that was like on a 3rd and 7 where I feel like they probably would have ended up punting from there. And so he runs this. I didn't see it live that it was like a little double move, but he runs like a little double move, like kind of at the chains,
like an out and up. Yeah.
Yeah, which like I can kind of understand Malachi Moore is thinking like 3rd and 7. Tony's like, but like no, like Mullen's like no, we're gonna throw deep on 3rd and 7, like with Tony coming out of the slot. It's like okay, like that makes things difficult.
Yeah, they even threw deep at Pat a couple times.
Yep.
Once successfully.
Talking about the one where he was like clearly in great position. Just
that was a weird play.
Totally in phase, and just like I don't know. I said this to y'all, and I don't remember if I said it on Twitter, but it really looked to me like he must have just lost track of the ball. I don't know if it was in the lights or whatever, because he just like he was in position and he was like looking in the direction of the ball, and he just didn't react to it at all. Which was very odd. Yeah, didn't jump, didn't get an arm up, didn't do anything. He just sort of ran alongside him while he caught the ball. Like it was very strange, but like not something that I'm really worried about happening in the future.
Yeah, I know there was like a little push in the back there, but not enough where like he didn't even make an attempt to play the ball. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't come away from the game concerned about the defense. Maybe that's our brand at this point.
But maybe if the issues they had were more in line with some of the issues they had earlier in the year, and it was like they didn't really fix these things, they just played worse offenses. But it wasn't that. Like it was they made some mistakes that were uncharacteristic. They didn't make a few plays that they would normally make, and Florida played great. Like beyond the qualitative aspects of how those 46 points and however many yards happened did not concern me really like on a long-term basis.
Yeah. So I guess that transitions then into Alabama's next game. Unless we want to talk about the offense a little bit. We might as well talk about the offense at least for a few minutes. The offense is good.
Yeah. I mean, they're great. Do we how do we feel about the prospects with Chris Owens coming in for Landon?
Yeah. I really wanted to go back. I just didn't get a chance to do it. But I really wanted to go back and watch. I think he started 4 games at center last year. A couple against SEC teams, I think. And I wanted to go back and rewatch those, and I just didn't get the chance. I don't know. My gut says that the reason he lost his job last year had more to do with the fact that once Deontay Brown came back, their best 5 just didn't include him.
Yeah. Like it wasn't, and like he was having concussion issues also, I think, or had some injury issues, and right around the time that Deontay came back as well. He played center for a little bit against Tennessee, and there wasn't any drop off really. He's been good as a backup tackle this year. He doesn't obviously have Landon's mean streak, but I don't think there's going to be a a huge drop off in terms of like the quality of assignments. You know, like he's going to do his job. He's going to block his guy. Like he's not going to like, you know, look for work and come over when he's unblocked and just like wreck a pass rusher who's engaged with another guy. Like, and that has value for an offensive line. Like that's
Right.
something that you want guys to do because like it kind of gets in guys' heads and it's, you know, but I don't think it's a big loss, no question, but it's not. I don't think this like introduces a weak link. I don't think this like takes the offensive line from being like one of the very best units on the team to like one of the worst.
It feels to me like the biggest downside here, or the biggest issue, is the increased risk, and I think the risk is slight, but the increased risk of mistakes happening, like of a turnover happening, or of like a botched snap or a botched protection, you know, something like that. I think that the increased risk, him playing and increasing the risk of that happening is really the concern here. I don't have so much concern about how he's actually going to play, like how he's going to do blocking and stuff like that. Or just that, but like how he's going to do blocking. I think like the thing that would stop this Alabama offense is if there's some mistake, right?
Yeah.
There's a botched exchange, or they miss a protection and there's a free rush run Mac and there's a mistake there, you know, the turnover, you know, sack fumble or something like that. And this probably increases the risk of that happening a little bit. I'm glad that his first game won't come in the national championship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it'll be nice to get this one under his belt before that. It's really hard though. I mean, he's not going to play as well. Like in terms of his blocking, it's not going to be as good as Landon. But it's not. I think, like Carter said, it's not going to be. It's not going to be like a weak link. You're not going to be like watching play after play and being like, man, like this guy, he just can't play. Like he can play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mitch, where do you come down on?
Well, I was basically going to say the exact same stuff that you did. We have, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like the PlayStation Player Impact Rating thing that sometimes gets advertised on ESPN broadcasts, but it's basically like a college football version of the RPM metric we have. But what's different is, so it's a lot of like on-off. It uses like a lot of on-off EPA-based stuff.
Okay.
And it's position specific. And center always came out as like a relatively important position. It was like always quarterback, and then like slot receiver, which was like a combination of like slot receiver and like tight end type stuff. And then it was like somewhere between, and then tackle and center would kind of like go back and forth in terms of like the relative importance or impact of each position. And we always thought that was like kind of weird. And then like Paul had talked to somebody. Yeah. And they talked about how, you know, the centers were like, it could be that the centers, it's because the centers are always responsible for like, you know, protection assignments.
Right.
Right. And I assume because they have to physically snap the ball. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. That, you know, I've always kind of looked at it a little more critically of like, oh, maybe like, because I think before the season or anything, I would have been like, oh, it's just the center, like it's not a big deal. But yeah, and I still think Owens is like very clearly like an above replacement guy. So I think, sorry.
Yeah, and he's like he's played center before. He has started there before. He's gotten consistent action this year. Like he's very clearly like the sixth lineman.
And the guy that he was backing up was excellent. Like,
yeah,
like, it's not like the guy that, you know, he lost his job to somebody who wasn't like really, really good. Anyway,
do we have any thoughts about like? It's interesting how Alabama does this where a lineman goes down and they kind of have their sixth lineman who comes in almost no matter the position, rather than basically having like your direct backup come in.
Mhm.
I guess that's preferable. Like because I know they cross train these guys. This is obviously an example where Chris Owens actually has like started games at center. So this is probably not like the most obvious example of this happening. But I think I like that they cross train these guys well enough where they can feel like they can always get their five best, healthiest offensive linemen on the field together, even if the guy isn't playing like his most natural position.
Yeah, it just goes back to like Saban very clearly has this philosophy of you kind of play your five best linemen no matter what.
Yep.
Like it's not a thing where like, oh, it's a positional fit and we can't have this guy playing right guard. Like Alex Leatherwood started an entire year at right guard when he is like very clearly such a natural left tackle. And I think they also do, like, particularly with the idea of having a sixth lineman, I think in a lot of situations they tend to want that guy to just be the backup, like in game in particular. So like if you lose somebody, you just plug in the guy who is the sixth best guy so that you don't miss too much of a beat. Whereas like if you lose someone long term, like I don't know, if knock on wood, like if Alex Leatherwood got hurt in other circumstances, obviously Owens is in now, but like before Dickerson got hurt, if Leatherwood went out in a game, you probably just plug Chris Owens in there because he's the next guy, and you just want to have a seamless fitting game. Long term, like if Leatherwood's out for the year, like you probably move Evan Neal over, right?
Yeah.
So some of it comes down to like a short-term replacement versus a long-term replacement, and it's not really applicable here because it's clear that Chris Owens was the long-term replacement at center. But
yeah, I would be very interested to hear Saban be asked about that philosophy, about sort of like like almost favoring the idea of getting your five best guys on the field as opposed to making sure that guys are in their like best possible positions. Because I don't think that every coach would approach it that way.
Yeah.
But look, just the fact that they're fortunate, like, because when these kind of injuries happen, normally you're not even going to be able to plug somebody in that actually has starting experience at that position. So the fact that they have a guy to plug in that has starting experience at that position, and like went through an entire camp last year as the starting center, that makes me feel pretty good.
Yeah. Well, and Mac talked about in the offensive press conference thing that like last year when he was the backup and over the second half of the season when Chris Owens was the backup center, like they worked, like they are comfortable with each other because they had worked together with the backups. So like you don't even have that aspect of quarterback and center getting used to each other as much.
Like and they'll have like extra, it's not like they had the bye week, right? I know they went home a little bit, but they've got the extra practice time before this game, and they'll have even more practice time before another game. If they play another game,
were they to play another game?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like for this game, like not very concerned.
Yeah, and Notre Dame doesn't have this is a very good Notre Dame defense. This is a very good Notre Dame team generally, but like they don't have like dominant defensive linemen.
No.
They've had some of those in recent years, but not that's not the strength of this defense.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. So do we want to kind of segue more into maybe like some specific Notre Dame stuff? I guess probably. Well, what do we think about their defense, just generally? Where their rankings S&P Plus has them in the low teens defensively, I think. I don't.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
They're 10th in FPI.
Okay.
I was gonna go look up what they were before the Clemson game. They were just 9th.
They're just like, I don't know, like the linebackers are very good. They're, I don't know, they're solid. They have like pretty good talent all around. They just, you just need elite athletes to even really have a prayer against an offense like this, as long as it's not stopping itself. And they just, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of the same of what it was against Clemson, and even in that first game against Clemson when they were going up against DJ, like he threw for like 450 yards, like and they were able to shut down ETN, but they were like, I don't know, they were also devoting a lot of resources to that and didn't have, because DJ's shoulder was hurt or something, and so they weren't really using him as a runner at all, like they do with Trevor in big games. So like,
I thought they had a lot of issues in the second game against Notre Dame based on Trevor's ability to run the ball. Obviously that doesn't, that's not going to be a factor in this game because Mac's not going to be he's not going to be running it at all. But they did have a rough go of it generally.
Yeah.
And I think like from watching them, I think there's two really good players. Number 6, the outside linebacker, and Kyle Hamilton, 14, is very good. Other than that, it's a solid. It's like solid. They're kind of like solid across the board, and I just don't. Maybe I'm just like it's just like a very big oversimplification, but I just don't think they can stop Alabama.
Yeah,
I don't see ways they can like consistently affect Alabama's execution.
Like, I mean, it's the same story for any defense that doesn't just have like absolute dudes. Like, are you gonna try to put 8 in the box and not let Najee get going on you? Well, okay, now Devontae Smith's gonna get one-on-one matchups and you're gonna get toasted there. Are you gonna sit back in too high like a lot of teams have done now? Well, okay, then Najee's going to run for 150 yards, and Alabama's like, there's something to be said for a strategy against a team like this, which a lot of teams employ now, which, like Brent Venables did against Tua in 28, like, of just sitting back and say, move between the 20s as much as you want. We'll not let you get over the top of us. We'll stiffen up in the red zone when there's less space. But, I mean, this Alabama team is so good at just taking what's there. Like, they don't become like, yes, you want the explosive plays, and that's what really makes the greatest offenses today. But like this Alabama offense has such a great kind of counterpunch in terms of just being able to go to underneath stuff and Najee, and that like they don't get a lot less effective when you make them drive the length of the field. Like, it's still probably the better strategy, but they're really, really good at that too.
Well, they didn't really have the explosive plays against Florida, right? I don't know off the top of my head how many like 20-plus yard plays they had, but I don't think it was that many. And the Devontae Smith touchdown, the first touchdown, the first Devontae Smith touchdown was definitely one. Other than that, like, I don't know. I don't think it was that many. And they definitely, maybe, I don't even know if they had a single, at least pass play of 20-plus yards against Arkansas. So like these teams are trying to do this, and it's not the results aren't showing up on the scoreboard at the very least.
Yeah, like both of those teams stopped the explosive plays, and both of those teams gave up
over 50 points. Yeah, maybe both 52. I don't remember exactly how many points.
I had a briefing where was it 62 against Arkansas, or was it just 52?
I think it was 52. So, yeah, I don't. Like I was watching some of that Clemson game, and they're aggressive, and like the Clemson's first touchdown, they come out in cover one, and they're playing some tight man coverage on the outsides, and they got their single high safety, and that was the long Amari Rogers touchdown. You can't do that against Alabama because they're gonna score touchdowns if you do that. So because the thing that Notre Dame also doesn't have, and I think to me, like this is maybe the crucial point, is that they don't have great edge rushers. I don't even know if they don't have I don't even think they have very good edge rushers.
Yeah.
I don't know where they rank, like in terms of sacks or whatever, but but if they're getting sacks, I don't think that they're coming from like their edge rushers winning, individual matchups and everything. And if you don't have that, it becomes very difficult against Alabama.
Like you have to be able to disrupt things up front without committing extra resources to the blitz or to getting numbers in the run game. Like, and there's just not really any teams, it seems like, that are going to be able to do that this year.
Yeah. Notre Dame they really see. I thought Clemson was going to win. Like I think we all did. I think everybody did, right? I mean, there was a reason they were like 10-point favorites or whatever. I didn't necessarily think that Notre Dame was going to come out and look like they didn't belong on the same field as Clemson. And they didn't. And for the first quarter, they did look like they belonged on the same field as them. And I think that's more because of what they were doing on offense. And I think we'll get to that next. But I don't know if you guys had any takeaways from that game specifically that was some stuff we can glean about, like, how good Notre Dame is, because I do think, like, we knew coming in to that game that they weren't on the same level as Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State. But how much did that game change your guys' opinion of Notre Dame?
Not a ton. Like, I think the big thing was, like, so Notre Dame's now on like their third string center, which hurts their offensive line, which had been a big strength of the team. And Clemson's defense is a lot healthier, and their defensive line is healthier than it was in that first matchup. And it just looked like Ian Book was, like, they got to him early, they got pressure up the middle, and they just totally threw his processing off. Like, he wasn't nearly as like, I don't know. If Alabama can't get pressure on him and kind of force him into mistakes, like, you can't really see a way for Notre Dame to win this game without, crazy shit happening. It's not hard to envision the way in which they, like, cover, essentially, and it's that, Alabama doesn't get a lot of pressure. Book scrambles around and makes some Manziel-like plays, picks up some third downs with his legs, just manufactures a few drives that way. And Alabama is a little sloppy on offense. But, like, yeah, I don't think... If anything, it made me a bit more confident in Alabama's ability to really shut them down on offense, just because they'll probably have a greater ability to affect him than maybe I thought they might, because that offensive line, for the most part, is really, really good.
Excellent.
But then, like, the way Alabama's pass rush has gotten better lately, and with them being on, I think it's like the third string center, and the way Clemson was able to get pressure on him, especially up the middle, like, I feel more confident in Alabama's covering that big spread after watching the Clemson. Like, if you told me in advance what the Notre Dame was going to be in this game and what the spread was going to be, I feel more confident about them covering it now than I did beforehand. And it's not that I, like, think Notre Dame is a worse team. Like, this is a very good, like, I don't know. There's been a lot of discourse about, like, why is Notre Dame here? Like, they just can't compete, like, blah, blah, blah. And it's not even that, like, oh, they shouldn't be here. Like, I think everyone's in perfectly fine agreement that, like, yeah, they made total sense as the pick for the fourth spot. But it's like, there seems to be this expectation that they should be able to compete at the highest level, and they're just like there's in Stuart Mandel's mailbag on The Athletic today. Somebody was like, it doesn't seem like Brian Kelly's able to get them to compete with the Alabamas and Clemsons of the world. Like, should they think about forcing him out because, someone's going to get them? Who is going to get you to that next level? That tier doesn't exist for you. Like, there's just a talent differential, for Alabama and Ohio State. And if Georgia ever gets a quarterback, like, that's a tier of talent that I don't think people appreciate how insanely high it is, because those teams are all like 80+% in blue chip ratio, and Clemson.
But
Clemson's a little lower than that, but they're always elite at the positions where it matters most. Right. So if they're functionally in that tier.
But does Notre Dame have a higher recruiting ceiling though than they're hitting now? I mean, they are Notre Dame. Right. I mean, I know like they're not a Southern school, and that hurts them, but obviously, Ohio State, maybe Ohio State is okay. Ohio State geographically is obviously the exception that proves the rule. But if there was any other team that was also going to be part of that exception that proves the rule, it would be Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, I think the additional layer of academic restrictions for them is probably that like final restrictor plate, because I mean they're a blue chip team. Like I don't remember what their exact ratio is. It's probably in the like low mid 50s, which puts them on par with a lot of like SEC teams, a lot of like teams that are consistent programs but not in that top tier. So like I feel like there's a ceiling for them recruiting wise that they are pretty close to.
Yeah,
like maybe they're just high enough that like if you just execute a little better and you get like a dude at quarterback, then they could pull a 2019, maybe not 2019 LSU, but do something that's a little bit more like that, a little bit more like what Clemson does. Like if they got a dude at quarterback, then that could put them in contention. Like, I don't know, Clemson with Deshaun. Like Clemson was not as talented with him as they are now.
Right.
And they just had a dude at that.
Yeah.
So it's really like the next level for them, such it exists, is not so much upgrading the overall level of the program. It's just like hitting on a couple of guys and
at the right positions.
Right, exactly. Like get a defensive line, get wide receivers, because that's the big thing they don't have right now is elite.
Well, I was gonna,
and they may have had some of those guys, but they had guys hurt before the year. So, but yeah, get those dudes at those most important positions the way Clemson does, and such as the next year exists, that's where it is.
Yeah, I agree with everything. The only thing I was gonna add is like, I don't know how many people are like dying to play for Brian Kelly. Like, I've never really watched an interview of his or whatever and felt particularly inspired to go. Like, as much as I don't like Dabo, and I kind of can see the angle of like wanting to play. Like,
all of Dabo's former players for the most part like love him.
Yeah,
like he's definitely a dude that like that sells it and like gets the loyalty of guys. Like it.
The Saban's appeal is obvious. Like Urban's appeal. Like I get it. I like Brian Kelly just not like. I think he caps their ceiling as much as the education requirements do, and particularly at quarterback, because like the way he's treated quarterbacks like so publicly, like in games, it's like why as a good quarterback would you ever want to go play for that guy?
Is he still doing that stuff? Like I think I remember like the stuff with like Everett Golson or whatever, like way back. Is he still? I guess I just haven't watched.
He seems to have dialed it back a little bit, I think, is the consensus. Like he isn't as often purple faced on the sideline as he was maybe like 5 years. Yeah.
It is though. Like in his defense, How many other? I know that they weren't technically a P5 team for all of these seasons, but I'm going to consider them. They played like a P5 schedule. How many P5 teams have had 3 undefeated regular seasons in the last 9 years?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. A lot of people are not like. He's made them into a really good team. They've made the playoff twice and been a perfectly reasonable choice for it both times. There's just like, I think it's just a lot of like the focus on the playoff and the focus on the Alabamas and Clemsons and Ohio States of the world has led people to just like, there's this idea that you're either in that tier or you're garbage, when that's just like, they've built a really great program there. Like he's built some really good teams. They're in a tier that a lot of teams would love to be in. They just can't break into that next one. And very few programs even have the ability, even have the theoretical ceiling of reaching there. And maybe Notre Dame did 35 years ago, but I don't think they do now.
Yeah. I just wanted to sort of bring it back to the game and to circle back to a point that Carter made. I think their weakest position group is their wide receivers, their pass catchers. They don't have anybody. They got some like big guys. They got some guys at wide receiver who look like they should be tight ends. I don't think that those guys are going to be able to get any separation, and they couldn't do that against Clemson. I think you're right, Carter. That I think you're right that it wasn't all the wide receivers. That Book was very uncomfortable for whatever reason, and he had opportunities to get the ball out sooner on some of those plays, and he just wasn't doing it. But at least part of the issue was that those guys were not getting open.
Yeah,
and there's no reason to think that they're going to get open against Alabama.
Like Darion Kendrick is he's probably the best pure cover corner Clemson's had over the last, I don't know, 5-6 years. I forget the other guy on the outside, but he's pretty solid. Like the secondary is at least on the outside is pretty good. I'm not gonna dole out too much praise for a safety unit that's a white boy from Vestavia starting at safety, which I can say is a white boy from Vestavia.
Yeah.
But so give Clemson some credit for the fact that they can't separate, but these dudes are not like Clemson's guys are not as good as Pat and Josh and Kai, and these are just not elite separators in any way for Notre Dame. Like they'll probably win some 50-50 balls just on account of being large, but
right. I could see, I could see the offensive line playing very well, and I could see them giving Book a lot of time. I think you're right, like the center situation. So if I think all their other offensive linemen are healthy, I believe. So I think it's just the center. And I don't know if Alabama's going to be able to replicate Clemson's success in terms of getting pressure up the middle if Alabama's inside linebackers don't contribute more in that area. So I could see him having a lot of time back there. He sits back and these plays go 5 seconds and he moves around a little bit and then somebody springs free and he makes a play. Or he's able to run for some yards because they catch Alabama in man and somebody gets out of their rush lane and he makes some yards that way. So it's kind of, you could definitely see them making plays outside of the X's and O's. It's very difficult for me to see them having success throwing the ball within the X's and O's. And I think there's a reason. I saw somebody, I think it was somebody Mark Woods on Twitter, talked about how, posted some graphic earlier about how they run the ball so much on second and long.
I didn't know that until he posted.
So
Sark's gonna get jealous.
Yeah,
we're gonna see some 2nd and 12 dodgy runs.
I hope he's not watching too closely, but I just think that their passing offense just isn't that good.
Yeah, it's not the type that has historically had great success against Alabama.
Yeah, so I'm just so curious. They played some 3 tight end sets against Clemson. I really want to see if they're going to do that against Alabama if they're just going to come out and just, and they caught Clemson a couple times with these like late shifts, and Clemson didn't get lined up properly, and that's been an issue at times for Alabama this year. So maybe they'll try to do some of that, but like I really wonder if we're going to see like a very rush heavy attack here, which is not going to beat Alabama, obviously.
Yeah. Like I kind of expect that, because I think they're going to try to shorten the game and reduce Alabama's possessions. But that's not the way to score enough points. Like even if you hold Alabama well below their average scoring output, you're not going to keep up with them playing that way, even if they're not scoring as much as usual.
Yeah, I'm almost like just actually interested to see them doing that, them going with such heavy formations and with how good their offensive line is, despite the center situation. I'm just kind of interested to see how Alabama's front plays against those guys. Like I'm less interested in making a prediction, or and more just interested in seeing like how do they play? Like how do guys like Will Anderson, hold up against that kind of weight? Yeah. Can they get pressure on the quarterback? Can they defend the run? I'm just like super curious to see, because I think Card made the point earlier that they, outside of the three guys, they don't really have a lot of people coming in and making splash plays. But I also think that we'd all agree that this defensive front has improved considerably as the year has gone on. Really, really in large part because of the ascension of the three main guys, right? Allen, Anderson, and Barmore, who have all gotten very consistently better as the season's gone on. So I just kind of want to see, like, now they're going against a really, really strong group, and I think it'll be informative.
Do we want to go ahead and do score predictions on this one, and then talk a little Ohio State Clemson? Yeah. Like, unless we have other talking points for Notre Dame.
Do you guys remember what the spread was before the national championship game against Notre Dame?
I would say 10 or 11 points.
Yeah, I didn't
would guess remember closer to 2 touchdowns, but
yeah, that's how I mean, obviously my memory was clouded by the result, but like this is I came
what was it? Do you know?
I think it opened at like 8.5 or 8 and ended up at 10 or something, 9.5, 10. Yeah. I had trouble because I couldn't find I don't know what the best resource for finding spreads. 8 years ago is, but
yeah. Alabama played. There was a great narrative around that Notre Dame team, right? I mean, we thought that they had the national narrative legitimately was that was a truly great defense, led by a historically great player.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's how he was viewed.
An inside linebacker who was second in the Heisman voting.
Right. And who won all the other major awards, if I remember correctly. I remember he beat out Johnny for every other major Player of the Year award until the Heisman. So they have this defense, which is considered to be probably maybe the best defense in the country, led by this generationally great inside linebacker. And they had some talent. Tyler Eifert was a first-round pick. I know they had the two backs who were pretty good, Sierra Wood and Theo Riddick. Yeah. So the narrative around them was that they could play. And they had I forget the names of the kids, but they had some defensive linemen who were all heavily recruited by SEC schools. So it doesn't shock me. It doesn't shock me that it wasn't a 3-touchdown type deal going into that game. And look, Alabama had played close games down the stretch. Mm-hmm. They narrowly beat LSU. They lost to A&M, and they narrowly beat Georgia. Now, yes, now, especially in retrospect, we know that those three teams are way better than Notre Dame. but at the time, though, Alabama was kind of scraping by.
Yeah, I was just floored that this is double that spread. I was thinking this team was probably slightly better than that Notre Dame team, and I went back and was wow.
I just think like I guess I'm just thinking like going into that game. I don't know if I expected Alabama to break 30 points.
Yeah, I expected something much lower scoring.
AJ was not great. I think it came out later that he was like playing with broken ribs or something until the national championship game. Like he broke his ribs against Mississippi State, and then he was playing with that through the SEC championship. But like AJ was not playing all that well down the stretch. They were very injured at wide receiver, and I think going into that game, I was like, they're probably not going to break 30 points, and and then they came out and scored touchdowns on like 6 of their first 8 offensive possessions. But if I'm like, if I don't think they're going to break 30 points, and I don't think they're going to like shut out Notre Dame, so 10, 11 points, like sounds right to me.
Well, and there's also just a thing of that spreads for games like this are bigger than they used to be, just because offenses are different. Like,
I think that's a great right. Yeah, that's the thing. Like people are like, well, this Alabama offense is, it should be at least in the mid 40s, and if they're at least in the mid 40s, it's going to be pretty easy to potentially see them covering a 20-point spread.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so score predictions.
I'm thinking like 45-20.
I was gonna be very honest. I was gonna do 45, and then I was deciding. Mitch, you go ahead if you have something.
I'm in that. I don't want them to break 20, so I'm just gonna go like 40, 48, 17. I think is.
Okay. I was gonna go for. I had 45 in my head, and I was trying to come up with a low 20s number, so it's basically just like 20, 21, or 24. What do I go with? So I'll go with 24. I hate locking myself into predictions that don't involve a field goal, because it's like, they come out and they kick a field goal on the first drive. It's like, oh, well, now I'm fucked, or now I need like a 2-point conversion or something later, or a second field goal. And so I'm a big fan of making the predictions that involve at least one field goal. I feel like that leaves me a margin for error. So I'll go 45-24. So we all clearly expect something, pretty similar here.
Like I think there's going to be enough of those plays, like you were talking about, where the pressure doesn't get home and Book sits there for a bit and then finally ends up making something happening, that like they're going to string together a few scoring drives, but it's just not going to be enough. And then even if the defense starts well, the dam is going to break at some point.
Right.
Do you think the defense comes out motivated after the Florida game at all? Do you think there's any like kind of chip on their shoulder?
I will say that I think this has a chance to be like an elite defensive performance. I'm not predicting that clearly by saying 24, but I think there's a better chance that Notre Dame is less than that, and maybe considerably less than that, than over that. Like I think Alabama I could see Notre Dame scoring only like 10 points in this game. Like I could see the Alabama defense playing really great.
I think under 14 is more likely than over 28.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think this is a bad matchup for Notre Dame's offense, because you need skill, you need dudes at wide receiver against Alabama.
Yeah.
Even if not to make plays, even if you just want to throw to your tight ends and backs all day, you need those dudes at wide receiver to at least occupy attention. And they can't do that. So it's very, very. I could really see Alabama coming out and having a really great day defensively.
Like there's not a whole lot of reason. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, no, you go ahead, Carl.
I was just saying, I don't think there's a whole lot of reason for Saban in this game to like do anything. Like probably gonna play a lot of like cover 3 match and have the other safety in the box a lot of the time. Like there's not really any reason to respect Notre Dame's deep passing.
No.
And if they're playing well when they've got those numbers, like it could be a long, like I could easily see one where they really do, things just start to snowball on Notre Dame's offense.
And like Mitch was saying, I love Alabama coming. I love picking Alabama to do something really good coming off a bad performance.
Especially with like more on the horizon too. Like
yes,
where if they play exceptionally well, there's like more to play for kind of.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the other game. So let me start off with this. I'm just sort of curious up front. Do we all think that Clemson's going to win?
Yeah.
Like if we all had to make a prediction, we're all picking Clemson, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm picking Clemson. Carter, Mitch, are you saying you're picking Clemson by a little bit, or are you saying it's very close?
I mean, I'd probably take Ohio State in the points, but
yeah,
the spread's what, like
7.5,
like 7.5 or something. Yeah.
And now Clemson's not going to have their offensive coordinator, which I think like matters. Despite zero line movement.
I was gonna ask, like, has the line not moved at all? That's weird. Like, you think even just that it would drop, like, because you're at that inflection point, like, and you think losing the offensive coordinator, like, even if you assume Clemson's got this army of analysts and assistants and such, like Alabama does, like, they're probably gonna be fine. But like, I would expect an Alabama spread to drop a point at least if Sark were out.
Sark.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I expect Clemson to win. Like, yeah.
This is not an elite Ohio State defense.
No.
I think it would be different if it was.
And the secondary in particular is rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I think I would say that maybe outside of people in Ohio, we're certainly the high man here on Ohio State. Judging just by the narrative around them.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. The 6 games is definitely part of it. I think people just don't want to really give a team a lot of credit who played 6 games. It feels through a bunch of picks against Indiana, and that sticks out in people's minds, and that game ended up being like way closer than it should have been.
He had a bad game against Northwestern.
He had a terrible game against Northwestern, and the first half of that game was really weird, and that's going to stick out in people's minds. What's not going to stick out in people's minds, I guess, even though I think it should, so they ran for over 300 yards against Northwestern.
Out, like,
and say what you
want
about
they were missing
the
like 20 players against Northwestern.
Yeah. And like Olave and Wilson are really good.
Yep.
Like the receivers are good.
And they were missing Olave, I think. One of the two.
Yeah.
Missing Olave.
Yeah, Olave. Yeah. Yeah. So like that offense is great. I think that offense is better than Clemson's.
I do too.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people look at Ohio State and think they've underperformed when no, they haven't really. Like if you look at like an EPA efficiency, but like they've actually overperformed. Like we had them as the best offense coming into the season, with Alabama like kind of right behind, and they've like outperformed expectations by like 1.5 points. So
you have them as the number 2 offense in the country?
Number 2, yeah. Alabama's like soared past them, but yeah, they're number 2.
Okay.
I think it's the same in SP Plus too. Like Alabama's won by a healthy margin, but like, well, even like in the overall numbers, like I know in SP that like this game is like a toss-up, and I remember it being pretty simple. Like, what would the spread per FPI?
Well, FPI has Ohio State ahead of Clemson, I think, right?
It doesn't love Clemson. It adjusts slower to like them. Like I think S&P Plus will more quickly adjust to like getting Trevor Lawrence back for Clemson's offense.
Okay.
Clemson's offense is like 7th or 8th in FPI, which I think is probably
the
big disconnect.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I think in general, both systems probably have too much baked in for Clemson's kind of midseason performances where they were missing Trevor or they had a lot of guys hurt on defense. Like it's easy for me to see that like both of those could be underrating Clemson by, I don't know, 3 points, 4 points, maybe. Like, there's a decent possibility that they're closer to Alabama than they are to Ohio State, but there are still definite flaws in this team that you would not have, like, both of these teams I think are a good bit worse than they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Was I think, but I like people are just like misconstruing this idea of Clemson being a favorite, with Clemson being like a lock to win.
Yeah.
Right, that's really the big thing here.
Yeah, like it's a 7.5 point spread.
And even if the 7.5 point spread, like even if that accurately captured the distance between the two teams, which I think both of us don't think that's the case. Compound, and that's again compounded by the fact that Clemson's without their offensive coordinator. They're also without, now, we don't necessarily think highly of Nolan Turner maybe as a player, but he's very experienced, and he's when you think he's like a redshirt senior, right? And I'm sure he's making calls for the secondary, and he's not going to be.
He's going to be back next year, isn't he? He's totally going to use that extra year. He's going to be like 25 definitely playing for this defense.
Yeah. But even if the 7.5 point spread accurately captured the distance between those two teams, Ohio State, you win a game where you're a touchdown dog, like what, 30% of the time, maybe 25% of the time.
Yeah, I don't
something
know
like that.
What that win probability translates to off the top of my head, but it's not minuscule. Like it's
right. And like Ohio State could score, they could score 35 points in this game. They could even score 40 points in this game. And I'm not so sure that Clemson. I'm not so sure that Clemson's ceiling is equally high. Yeah. I do think that like Ohio State, the defensive issues that Ohio State has, like particularly in the secondary, I think that is problematic. Although, outside of Amari Rodgers, it's not like Clemson has a whole bunch of great receivers like in some past years.
Yeah, like Cornell Powell, the senior, has been pretty good. And this EJ will, okay, what the hell is happening in Phoenix City that they keep giving Clemson great receivers? Like, what is going on? Somebody needs to go there and investigate what in the world is happening with receivers from Phoenix City. But this EJ Williams kid is pretty good.
Yeah, he's coming on. He's coming on. Yeah.
But they still, this is not like a Justin Ross T. Higgins situation. And part and parcel
it's certainly
with
not
that,
like a Mike Williams.
Yeah. Part and parcel with that is that Trevor's numbers against man coverage this year are very pedestrian. Right. Not even just it's not nearly as good as when it's own. It's on an absolute scale, kind of bad.
And I think maybe part of what's happening, people are definitely lower on Fields now than they were, say, at the beginning of the year. I'm not. I still think he's incredible. I might even say I like him the most of any quarterback in this class. Which is probably definitely a little bit of a hot take, but I'm very, very high on him. And now I'm seeing him. I saw a mock draft the other day where he was going 10th.
There are a lot of people who would now have Zach Wilson as their QB2.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a PFF draft that had Mac going ahead of. I
love Mac, but come on now.
Or maybe it was. Maybe.
Yeah, PFF had Mac going 15 in their latest one, which is
maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Maybe it was Fields 10 and Mac 15. Maybe that's it. So maybe it wasn't Mac higher, but I don't know. Look, I don't know why Fields has been throwing some interceptions. Why he threw 3 against Indiana, why he threw a couple against Northwestern. His he was like 12 for 27 or something against Northwestern, right? So like I'm not going to pretend to know why that happened, other than again, like the fact that they were without some guys, I don't think helped against Northwestern. And I really thought he played pretty well against Indiana. He just had like 3 really bad picks. But I think his like QBR in that game was like 83 or 84, so it's not like he was awful. He was awful against Northwestern. He definitely was awful against Northwestern.
Well, I think an underrated difference in this matchup as opposed to last year in particular, he was great in the first half at least of this game last year, but he was hurt. Like he had like a knee injury or something that he had been hobbled by the whole back half of the season, and so he was just not a running threat in that game, not at all. Like especially not compared to how good Trevor was in that game on the ground. But he's as far as we know, he's healthy now. So like, I think there's a real possibility that, especially with Trey Sermon looking as good as he is now, and Ohio State has a pretty good offensive line with them all healthy, and this is not the most dominant Clemson front of recent years. Like, I just think there's a possibility that they use him a lot in the run game and get a lot of yards that way. And especially, if that gets him a lot of one-on-one matchups with Olave and Wilson, like I like the ability of those guys to separate against Clemson's corners.
Oh, go ahead, Mitch.
So I was just going to say real quick, that was like part of what gave Clemson problems in their first game against Notre Dame. Is like Book was pretty effective running the ball.
Very.
So
either running the ball himself or creating or extending plays with his legs, and then yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board with like I like obviously he like Fields has struggled a little bit this year. I just don't know that it's predictive for a game like this. I don't know that you give him some motivation, you give him an extra week of practice, like
you give him a healthy team and a team that is not undergone nearly as much of a beating as all these teams that have played 10, 11, 12 games.
Right.
You give him his wide receivers back. I'm just not sure it's all that predictive.
What's their COVID situation right now? Now they changed the rules.
Conveniently changed the rule to 17 days instead of 21 days. I'm sure that was motivated purely by medical science.
By the science, absolutely, just by the science.
I will say we typically find out about their COVID issues like the day of the game or the day before, right? Like if somebody was going to be out, what do we even know yet?
Yeah, we didn't know until the day of the game against. I don't know. Well, maybe not. That's a good point. Like, I'm trying to think when.
I think we knew it was going to be bad then because it had been bad the previous week against Michigan State.
Right. When they couldn't. Right.
But I don't think we knew that those guys were out until like maybe 24 hours before. I don't remember the timing exactly.
Yeah. So we'll like TBD is the ultimate answer on the COVID situation, but if I had to guess, I'd say they're probably close to full strength.
Yeah, I would. I'm just going to assume that. I feel like I just feel like these teams have taken every precaution in these couple weeks leading up to this game. I did think it was interesting.
I have visions of Clemson players testing positive and Dabo taking them to like a faith healer and declaring them able to play.
What? Listen, if territorial or just not having enough faith in Dabo, but like if there was ever a coach that was going to find a way to sweep positive tests under the rug ahead of a huge game,
or a state that might find a way to help them out a little bit, like I don't know.
Yeah. So what was I? I was now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I did think. No, go ahead, Mitch.
No.
I did think it was interesting. Like, I don't anticipate any issues, but like, I did see that they came up with alternative dates for the playoff games. But like, took the time to stress that was not because of anything that was actually happening. right? But just merely as a precaution, as like a safety net. So I'm going to assume that that's not evidence that there's something off with one of these teams.
Yeah, I don't think I think they announced a little while back that they were not canned. Like if there was an outbreak for one of these games, that they were going to push them back instead of, they're not just canceling the CFP. So
right. So I guess what I'm like, my big thing coming into this game is that I do think that Clemson's going to win, but I think Ohio State is really going to show a lot of people just how great their offense is. And I think that the game, I really think I'm not going to make any guarantees or anything, but I think there's a decent chance that this game is played in the 30s.
Yeah, I don't think Clemson or Ohio State consistently stops Clemson, particularly when they're Clemson's receivers are not what they've been, but Ohio State's secondary isn't good enough to say no way those guys aren't going to separate. Right. They'll get some guys open. We'll see how much I don't know. Maybe Williams is that guy, and they'll be able to separate even against really good coverage. But Ohio State is not that team.
Right.
But Ohio State has some really good guys on offense. Really good, like elite, outside receivers, which is what you need. And I don't they're I've heard analysts whose eye I trust say that Fields has been a little slow processing his if you force him off the first read, his processing slows way down. But
so maybe that's part of the issue.
Yeah. But I mean, I have a really hard time seeing Clemson just totally shutting them down.
It's also less of an issue for a guy that can kind of extend plays too.
Yep.
And I think maybe people forget or don't realize, or maybe I just value it more than other people. But he's a really good passer. He's not the dual threat guy that's good enough as a passer to also complement the fact that he's a runner. He's a really good passer. He played baseball. He's a pretty natural thrower of the ball.
I mean, he had 40 touchdowns and 3 interceptions last year. You don't do that if you're not really, really good as a pure passer.
I think the ceiling for this Ohio State offense is higher than is higher than either of the units for Clemson. It's higher than Clemson's ceiling on offense or defense. And so I could see Ohio State getting hot and just making if I was going to bet on this game, I'd either take Ohio State in the points or the
money line,
the team total total for Ohio State.
Yeah. I would love the Ohio State money line in this game, but I guess it's difficult because I actually really want to predict Ohio State's going to win. I really want to do that. I don't think it's going to happen, but I want to predict it. I just want to share. It's not on topic, but it's related to the game that's going on right now. Wolken just tweeted. He just sent this to me. He tweeted, "Will Oklahoma have an argument to be preseason number 1 going into
there
next year?"
It is, baby. There it is.
That's amazing.
Perfect. Oh, we were just saying it. There's going to be some amazing takes from this game, and Wolken knocked it out of the fucking park.
Well, it's either going to be OU or Texas now. Texas, it's got to be one of those guys as preseason number 1.
Wolken does this stuff intentionally, right?
Yeah.
He's got to do this stuff intentionally at this point. Very funny, and everybody gets super worked up about it, which I feel is we should have gotten past that 5 years ago.
I had him muted for a long time after the in 2015 when it was if Ole Miss punches this in, feels like the season and a whole lot more. But now
How
I'm
do you
just
come
like
back from that?
I don't even care now. Like
You
I've
just bury it in all of your other ones that you've thrown out there before, and they just get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we want who's winning the Heisman?
I think it's Devontae.
I think it's Devontae too.
Really?
Like the final result rarely deviates a whole lot. Like if there's like a solid consensus among the like various like ESPN, Athletic, other outlets straw polls,
He's winning all the straw polls.
that is usually how it turns out. And it's kind of crazy to me that it had. I mean, we talked about this before. It's crazy to me how much it's coalesced around Devontae, but it seems like it has.
Yeah.
There's
it would be
definitely an appetite for a non-quarterback this year.
Yeah. Now I just do want to say, and I'm not gonna. I don't know. There's not really a point to make to actually draw out the argument, but I would give it to Mac. I think
it's fair. Yeah.
I don't think that that's the consensus among Alabama fans at this point. And I think like we already just talked about, I think that Devontae is going to win it. I would still give it to Mac.
I mean, like if Jalen Waddle is healthy, Mac is winning it running away.
Right.
Because Devontae never gets the volume to be in consideration as a receiver. It is really funny thinking about, we had joked before about Tua getting denied the Heisman, and now Mac is going to come in and win it. But imagine immediately after 2nd and 26, you tell someone, hey, one of those guys involved in that play, one of those two dudes is going to win the Heisman, and it's Devontae and not Tua.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that's just like Alabama quarterbacks just can't.
They're cursed.
They just can't. They just can't win it. Tua loses it on championship Saturday because of his high ankle sprain, and now Mac is going to lose it to his own player, to his own teammate. Mac's going to lose it to his own teammate because, and in part because Arkansas decided to drop 8 guys into coverage on every single play, and he didn't throw a touchdown pass. I don't know. I also kind of want Mac. I don't really know why. I also kind of like, if you ask me like who would you prefer to win it, for some reason I would just prefer Mac to win it.
I don't really have a strong preference between the two of them, and in that event it's sort of like tie goes to the non-quarterback for me, just in terms of like who you want to see win it. But like,
that's fair. I guess I just think like the Mac story is just crazy to me. It's just crazy that he's this good. It's crazy that he's having this kind of year.
Yeah.
And I just I guess I just want to see like that like the pinnacle of that, right, would be if he won the Heisman. And I guess I just like, that's where I lean. But I certainly don't like how it always goes to quarterback. So like I tie goes to the non-quarterback. I certainly like that argument as well. Mitch, what do you have are you rooting for someone, or?
My strong preference is that they finish 1-2. I don't know that I really have a strong, like, I got really excited because I was going through the Heisman list because I was trying to figure out if teammates had ever finished 1-2 before, because I couldn't remember where Leinart had finished when Bush won it, but I think he was third.
Right, he was third, right, and VY was 2, a distant 2.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that was like the Vince Young year. Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was going back and I got all the way to like 45, and then there were like
somebody
teams that won it.
That's right. Somebody sent that to me. Somebody tweeted that at me, that it was. I did not know that's like the only other time it's happened. 1 and 2 is a two Army players in 1945.
And I think that was also the year when they had like three out of the top 5.
Yep.
Which is also just what, like, I could easily see that just from vote splitting that Lawrence, and from like a subset of voters who views it as kind of a career achievement award, that
give it to him.
Lawrence gets enough second place votes that he moves in between the two of them. But
right. Who how do they decide how many finalists there are? Do you guys know?
I think it's like a point cutoff.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
it's
it
like a
varies.
It's
It
different
varies,
from year
right?
to year.
Some years there's as few as 3 guys, and some years there's as many as 6 guys. I think.
there's definitely a threshold. I don't remember if it was straight up points or if it was like percent of points or something.
Or like being on a
Okay.
percentage of ballots or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
but yeah, it definitely varies, and I think it's
Because I thought it would have been. I actually don't really necessarily think. I feel like this is also going to depart from sort of like the Alabama fan group thing, but I didn't necessarily think that Najee deserved to be top 4. I thought that number 5 was fine. I mean, I could certainly see the argument for top 4. I thought that number 5 was fine. I just thought it would be cool if he was a finalist. So like, it would have been cool if they just extended. If it had been 5 this year, I was hoping for that. But look, he finished 5th, and he certainly rolled with the punches in his interviews and everything. So.
okay.
Anyway.
Anything else for this week?
No.
All right. Well, we will see y'all sometime next week, presumably. It's going to be very odd if we're breaking down a loss to Notre Dame. But assuming they're in the championship game, we will be back sometime late next week probably, and we'll talk that through. And so we'll see y'all then and roll.